Okay, guys, and we're back with another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest. I'm Seth from the Lonely Stunner podcast, and this video is following UFC Fight Night Sandhagen v Figueiredo. But this video is not going to be about that fight. This fight's going to be about Jeremy Stephens versus Mason Jones. Now, unfortunately, didn't get time to do previews for this card, and also more importantly, I didn't get time to bet on this card either because my two confident picks for the two fights was Mason Jones and Sandhagen to win, and both guys won their respective fights. But this fight, like I said, this video rather, is going to be about Jeremy Stephens v Mason Jones. Now, Jeremy Stephens, of course, at this point is the UFC veteran, MMA veteran, has been around for a long time, has got notable wins over some interesting names in, featherweight and lightweight divisions. Obviously, I think probably what his most notable wins are, the likes of Darren Elkins, Renan Barão, Josh Emmett, are way past his prime. Gilbert Melendez, that's not really much of an achievement to me. Obviously, like I said, the Josh Emmett and Darren Elkins wins are probably his most relevant wins. Of course, by the time he fought Renan Barão, this was, during the USADA era, so Renan Barão was cooked. And then lost to pretty much everyone half decent with a pulse who he's lost to. Charles Oliveira, Max Holloway, Frankie Edgar, Moicano, Aldo, Yair Rodriguez, Zabit, all these guys, when they got the chance to face Stephens, beat him pretty handedly. Gamrot as well, Mateus Gamrot beat him, stopped him even in the first round, and that was actually Jeremy Stephens' last fight in the UFC before this. So, Jeremy Stephens' last run in the UFC, he went 3 years without winning a fight. I'll let that sink in. He went 3 years without winning a fight, then went to PFL, which, in terms of quality of fighter, for the most part, is a downgrade. He goes there to PFL and fights lesser opponents. He goes 2-1. No, 1-2, sorry, in PFL. He wins one fight. That's a split decision in PFL. And his first fight in PFL, his debut, he loses just in a unanimous decision. And then in his last PFL fight, he gets stopped in the second round by submission. Right? So Jeremy Stephens, even at his best, was... what can I say? Jeremy Stephens at his best is a ranked featherweight that maybe gets into the top 10, maybe pushes the top 10. But when he faces anyone that's ranked 7 or 8 and above, he's going to lose to them. So fringe top 10 world level, right? That's Jeremy Stephens at his best. He's far removed from that now. A lot of losses, taking a lot of damage, a lot of miles on the clock, and then he fights Mason Jones. Now, Mason Jones is a guy who, I'll be honest, I thought he was a bit younger than he was, but a guy with a very good record. He's now, I think he's 16-2. A Cage Warriors veteran, won a lot of fights in Cage Warriors, then had a run in the UFC where he won one fight and lost 2. He then got cut from the UFC. And since then, he goes back to Cage Warriors, wins 4 on the bounce, with, I think, 2 or 3 stoppages in that 4. And like I said, going into this fight, I'm like, of course, my money's going all on Mason Jones for this. And Mason Jones pretty much shut out Jeremy Stephens. It's kind of what I expect from anyone that fights Jeremy Stephens at this point. Anyone with half a pulse and is halfway okay at staying even halfway respectably good at the fundamentals of striking. You don't have to be anything amazing to beat Jeremy Stephens at this point. As long as you can avoid getting clipped and stay on the outside and dominate him and wrestle him and hold him down and beat him up, you can beat Jeremy Stephens. He's a very beatable fighter. And Mason Jones beat him. I think he avoided Jeremy Stephens' power very well for the most part throughout the fight. At no point was I really like, well, Jeremy Stephens could maybe get a stoppage here or maybe win this fight. It wasn't really like that. I was always pretty confident in Mason Jones going out there and getting the victory, and that's exactly what he did. To be fair, that's exactly what he did. Now, if only Mason Jones was this record and 26-27. If he was 26-27, he'd be on like my prospect watch. Do you know what I mean? He'd be someone, in my opinion, worth at least keeping an eye on. I'm not saying he's guaranteed to do anything at world level, anything at any sort of respectable, high, recognizable UFC level. Not saying that at all, because like I said, he has been in the UFC before. He won 1 fight, lost 2, got cut. That happened, right? But you got to think, surely going through that as a fighter, going back to Cage Warriors, getting those wins under your belt, mentally, that must do quite a lot for you. Going back, winning those fights, and then coming back and fighting Jeremy Stephens, mentally, you've got a huge boost at the moment. A huge boost at the moment. And I wouldn't, at lightweight, I wouldn't say I fancy him against any of the top of the division at all. I think stylistically, from the guys that are maybe 6 and 7 and below, there's some interesting stylistic matchups. Obviously, a guy like Dan Hooker stylistically matches up great with anyone, right? Because he's not good enough defensively to that offensively cause you problems on striking. Like, if you want to hit Dan Hooker, you can find him. Like, you can find him and land on him, and he's not going to try and wrestle you as well. So stylistically, Dan Hooker's good for anyone. But if Mason Jones can put together 2 more wins, 3 more wins, I could see a Jones v Moicano fight night main event. I could see that. Maybe in London. Mason Jones is, I think he's Irish or English. You know, he went to Cage Warriors, so he must be one of those. Right? I fancy that. If I'm being honest, I fancy that. You know? Come on, man. I fancy it. That's what I'm saying. I fancy it. But yeah. Like I said, Mason Jones, if he was a bit younger, he'd be on my prospect watch, but hey. Maybe another time, Mason Jones. Maybe in another time. But yeah, another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest in the bag, and I'm out. Peace.